Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Tonight, the 20th of December, we, the Beattys, you're stuck with us on some flies we call tip-up flies, or just when we're shouting up and down the stream at each other, what'd you catch it on? Oh, I got it on one of those TU flies. And it's not Trout Unlimited, I'm sorry, folks, but it's the tip-up fly. And the weekly tip this week, we're going to talk about the Dutch tool. And you're going to have to wait and find out just what that might be. For now, though, we're the Beattys from Boise, Idaho, and the lead presenter tonight is going to be Gretchen, and I would bet you need your recipe, don't you?
I do.
I got it right there.
And it's such a long one.
Yes.
I mean, this is a tough fly.
Yes, you take your time, otherwise I'll have to get to work too early.
Tonight I'm tying just on a dry fly hook. However, it looks real cool if you tie this on a scud. Using red thread and some black thread, both. Red floss for the body. And actually, the red thread that you see is actually the floss. I'm going to start off with that. That's that stretchy nylon floss. And the wings, it says ginger hackle tips, but I'm actually using some CDC and Cree or ginger. And I actually do have some Cree, so I'm going to use Cree for the hackle, black head. And as you can see, it says change colors for Tantrum and Aspersion. So I thought I'd like to do a little quote at this point from Gary. This is one of Gary LaFontaine's, these are his flies. And he always says that if the fish won't rise to the occasion, then throw a tantrum or cast an aspersion. So the occasion is the red floss, and the recipe you see there. The tantrum, you change the body to olive with grizzly hackle, and the aspersion is orange body with badger hackle. So I have tied all three of these flies. Yeah, I probably am just going to have to show them one at a time.
I don't know, that looked pretty good there. If you want, I'll hold that up there for you. You're having trouble seeing it.
Yeah, the light's in my way.
You can explain what's going on now.
Okay, this is the occasion. This is the tantrum here, and this is the aspersion.
And you ready to get started?
I am ready to get started.
Probably over on the materials.
Yeah, let's take a look at the materials.
All right.
As you can see, this crowded material board here, we've got the hooks, some CDC, I've got some Cree, and my thread, and that is it. And as easy as this is, you could really pump a lot of these out, and they are great to fish with. Let's move my materials over here, and I'll get my red thread out. Now, when I tied these three flies, I tied every one of them in a different order. Meaning, did I tie the wing on first? Did I tie the body on first? And I did it all different ways, and it really doesn't make any difference. So I'm just going to start my thread here. Actually, it's my floss. I love this.
It sure lays down a nice smooth body, doesn't it?
Look at that. And it's just no effort at all. I've been tying recently with some real silk, and it's a whole different process. But sometimes you've gotta do the what do I want to call it? The fancy stuff. So I'm gonna come right up here. What I've got here is just two pieces of CDC. Just kind of bunch it up like that. And I want it about the length of the shank. So that's a little long there. Let's see, that looks about right. And I'm going to tie it pretty close to the eye. Use my body little umph. Now I'm going to get my black thread, and I'm trying to take my time out, but I'm almost done with this fly. I hope you're ready.
I got to go to work then. Oh my goodness.
I'm just going to change my thread. I did this the other day when I was tying, and I cut off my black thread, and it's like, what? Why did you do that? I got to pay attention to what I'm doing. And I like to put my O-ring back on so I don't lose that thread. Oh, for some reason, I guess I better get away from the camera. I can't do it in front of the camera. All right. I need to do a little more trim there. Okay. Reach over and get one of my gray.
Getting your hackle out. Okay, good.
Getting my hackle out. And that one looks pretty good, and that should be plenty. We'll leave this longer one for later. Want some bare stem. Leave a little bare stem for my first few wraps. Now I've got that pretty tight. I don't think I can do a real good job with the whip finish tool, so I'm going to use a half hitch tool. So a half hitch is one wrap, two or more wraps. So whip finish. Do a couple of those.
And John Wright put a question out in the chat asking, what's the difference between grizzly and Cree?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a good one, and I'll tell you what, it depends on which manufacturer slash grower, whichever word you want to use, you're talking to, and how many they have. And in the world of genetics, it's impossible to breed for grizzly. You can put the components of a grizzly together, but it's a hybridization that happens on a hit or miss scale. And that's from the guy that ought to know, Dr. Tom Whiting. It not anything that I would be sharing with you. And I want you to notice that Gretchen is holding it up there. Grizzly has light brown, not light brown, light gray, a really dark gray, which is almost black, and that's it, just barred back and forth between them. I want you to notice, though, that Cree has each black section is faded into the black section by a short strip of faded brown, or in the actual color, it's kind of a ginger. So,
and these strips should go from side to side all the way through.
Just going to say that the chevron or the black strip that goes across has to cover from one edge of the pelt or the feather to the other edge. That would be from the tip of the tips to back.
And if it doesn't, they call it a barred ginger, don't they?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. You'll find quite a few of the. You can't on the hook. You can't tell much difference, and holding it up, just looking at it, you won't see much difference. But most of those bars there will be diamonds rather than chevrons, if you will. The way this is fished is like this. It's a tip-up fly. LaFontaine designed it specifically for an emerging insect. He felt that that this area here, where I'm pointing the red part of the body, would appear to the fish as some type of nymphal chuck that they're stuck, and this is a part that's kind of stuck on the way out. And I can't tell you that he's wrong. I can just tell you that the flies do catch a heck of a lot of fish.
Is
And
that in the LaFontaine book?
it's no, it's ones that he developed after the book was written, and it was in the LaFontaine videos that Gary laid out for us. I'll get my materials up here in the materials area.
After Gary got sick, he continued to develop flies, but because he couldn't fish them, he had a whole bunch of people, friends and people that would go out and fish the fly for him and come back in and report. So if you were ever visiting Gary during those years of his illness, you'd be sitting there talking, and it seemed like every time there'd be somebody coming in with a fish report on a particular fly. And sometimes they would take him with them, and he would sit in a vehicle at a spot where he could watch him fish.
There was that, and he also, a lot of times, before he got really, really sick, he'd go out and they'd carry him to the drift boat and set him in the back of the boat, and they'd usually take two boats down the river, and he'd be in one of the boats, usually the lead boat, sitting in the back seat, watching and taking notes of everything and so forth. He was quite a fellow to work with. I mean, he looked at things so different. It's amazing. The only thing I can say. Anyway, let's get back.
Anyway, these were one of the flies. These are some of the flies he developed during that period of time, and that he had other people test for him.
And the fly that I'm going to try tonight is going to have some similarities in its regard. As you'll see, this is called the Para Glen. And this fly, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do is, that's the roadmap fly, and as we get to the fly, I'll explain some of the history and how the fly actually came about and so forth. But for right now, let's take a look at the recipe on the Para Glen. It's pretty obvious just looking at the roadmap fly that the hook can be just about anything you want. I put down dry or scud. The sample that I showed you was tied on a scud, and it can be size 8 to 22. And in fact, when we fish these, we often fish a smaller fly on a larger hook, because you can land a few more fish on a size 20 tied onto a size 14 than you can on a size 20 tied on a size 20 hook. It's a lot harder to hook them, a lot harder to turn them loose, and it's tougher on the fish. So our choice when we were guiding was to always use the largest hook we could for the job. Made it a lot easier to turn the fish loose. Anyway, thread, black. Tail is optional. And you'll see that, well, we'll talk about that. The tail is optional. Though in this case, the body is poly yarn or its choice. And as you're going to see, I'm going to give you a whole lot of choices tonight on this thing. Wings, poly yarn or choice. Hackle, grizzly or choice. And the head is thread. And that's probably not a choice because the fly would come apart if you didn't use it. Get back to the roadmap fly. And I want to get my hooks out.
Do you want to go to the materials?
No, I think I'll just start. Well, go ahead. Yeah, set it. We need to just start setting some stuff over. Starting out, I got some bare hooks. I'll just set that over there. We're gonna need that. Materials, I'll just come over and get them as I need them. I better set another hook over there, and invariably, if I only got one hook, I'll drop it in the waste bin. While I'm doing it, get my thread. Okay, the hooks, we've already got them. I'm going to need some tailing material.
My goodness.
Yeah, I got a few things there. Anyway.
So back to the vise?
Yep, let's go back to the vise. Thank you, dear. And I'm going to take the roadmap fly out. And we'll just grab a hook. I'm using the scud hook. And for clarity's reasons, I'm doing it on a size a 14 hook. But as you can see, this fly here was, well, it would have been a good honest 14. a little bit larger. But as you'll see as we go, you can put them on smaller hooks and larger flies and vice versa. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do. And just remember there's a good balance between the fly that's attached to the hook and the hook itself, and how that hook will position itself in the water, if you will. I'm going to start my thread base right here at the hook eye. And if you're thinking about running off and getting some coffee or an adult beverage or something like that, the fly will be done by the time you get back. Because if you think Gretchen's is fast, this one's just about as fast. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, I am going to reach over to our materials area. And let's see, I need some poly yarn. And got that right there. This is a little bit heavy. I think it's too much. I need about half that amount to make a fly, but this would be good for about an 8 or a 10, maybe a 12, but a 12 would be pretty heavily dressed. I got to get all the knots out so I can split this. Otherwise, I'll just end up with a half split section of yarn and a knot in the middle of it and unable to go in either direction. Okay, here we go. Let's just kind of split this in half. Lay that one over there. Now's the time you probably want to pay attention, or we'll be done before you get started. I'm just going to tie a tuft on here, wrap back to the back of my thread base, come back forward, and now it's time to get a tool like this, you know, the plunger type tool. I'm just going to grab this piece of poly yarn and start twisting it. Cut some of that off, but I'm letting you see that I'm cutting off some of that way in the back there, it's going to get tangled up in my twisted, furled material. And now back up here, I'm going to fold this over and allow the furling to turn back on itself. There, that looks pretty good. And I'm just going to pull that off, and that's going to come untwisted now. And I'll just tie that off. Oops. There we go. Go back. And one of the things I like to do then is just give it a twist. And that'll really tightens that last bit up. Any pent up tension in there to twist will be released, and it'll it seems to tighten up the whole thing. Now I'm going to take a couple of loops around this to pull this up straight.
Where on the hook is that tied? Do you quit tying it onto the hook, Shane?
Wherever you want it to be. I've done this one in about the 1/3 point. I could have gone back a little further to the halfway point. I maybe have crowded myself a little bit. We'll see when I get the hackle on, though I don't think so.
Okay.
All right, now let's get slipped back over to the materials area. Notice that I got this up in the air. And of course, it'll go wherever, because it still is that poly yarn, but it's pretty much repositioned in that direction. Now let's get over here now to our hackle. And I'm just going to grab one of these.
So we're using
and leave the rest of them behind. And what I want to do here, I've got a damage spot there. I screwed it up in my, all right.
It's handy to have it in those hackle pliers, but sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I'm going to do is strip this off one side. And now to tell you a little bit about the fly. I told you it started in Sweden and came through Montana to here. Well, actually, it was developed in Montana, but the story starts back in 1991 when I was invited to demonstrate at my first European show, and I met a fellow there from Sweden by the name of Lars Åke Olsson, and became instant friends, about as good a friend as I've had in just a very short order. And he says, you know what? I really like the way you tie those hair wing western flies. My fishing club that I'm the president of has a lodge in Swedish Lapland. We want you to come there for a week and teach us how to tie them. So, okay, well, let's see it. And after we worked out the numbers and everything, I went there and taught a week-long class in tying flies to a group of Swedish businessmen from Stockholm who had this club in the North Country. And that all worked out good, went on home. Gretchen and I got married in 93, moved to Montana, to Bozeman, moved into our house. And we weren't there, no, just a very short time. The phone rings. We talked on phones back in those days. And it was Lars Olsen. I said, Jesus, Lars, how can you possibly, I should tie flies instead of talking. Let me get back here and get this back here. Where, and don't say a word, Gretchen. Don't say anything. And you guys back there laughing at me, just chuckle away. Anyway, the phone rang and it was Lars Olsen. I said, God, Lars, how can you afford to pay to call us all the way from Sweden? I mean, it's like $40 a minute in those days. He said, no problem. I'm just down the street from you. I got married to an American woman, and I live part of the year now in Montana, in Bozeman. I'm about a block and a half from you. So anyway, I said, oh my God. They were over for dinner a couple of nights later, and this fly is the result of, well, it's a parachute, obviously, but the Glen part comes from Glenlivet Scotch whiskey, because Lars loves the stuff, and if forced, I would drink it. And after about an inch of that went down in that bottle, the Para Glen was formed. And that was the size that we did for years and years and years. It was just like this, tied just this way. And understand that this would be on the big end of a fly. Now, the way this works, floats really well, and it's kind of like a built-in strike indicator, and you hook your other dropper fly right there in the bottom of the end of the hook, and you're fishing a fly below it. Works great as an indicator fly, and you catch a lot of fish on your indicator. And in fact, we used, let me get over here and I'll grab one. Here's another one. Now here's one, and this is tied on a size 20 hook. We got a 14 to the left and size 20 to the right. And you can go on down. You can see it's pretty easy to just keep going down in size. It really don't make any difference. And this is what we called, at the time we got a big chuckle out of it. Probably had something to do with the Glenlivet, but anyway, we called it the parachute that's not. So it's not a parachute, but it sure fishes and looks like one on the water. Speaking of which, on the water.
Well, just a minute. I want to say that.
Oh, okay.
Say that Joel says he ties a similar pattern called vertical midge, tied as you did with the hook and the vise in the normal horizontal position, but it fished with the eye up and the hook down, size 18 to 22.
Joel, thank you. I have heard of that fly, and it's I heard of it after we called this the Para Glen. We could have called it something else for that matter.
And Paul wanted to know if that poly yarn is a mixture of black and white.
It is.
Actually, black and gray really is.
It's a mixture of black and gray. And Paul, the truth of the matter is, I had a choice of paying an exorbitant amount of money for real gray poly yarn, or for $3 I could get one that was a mix of black and gray, and said that was good enough. And when I really need gray, I just pull the black strip that's down the center of it out.
I kind of like the way it looks anyway.
It turns out okay. I think it's fine. But anyhow, I forgot what I was doing.
Well,
we're going to the tank.
To the tank. Yeah.
Yes. Let me get this fly over there. Well, it's not focusing worth a darn, but I think you guys.
Starting to sink a little too. Look at it.
No, it's getting blocked here by the.
Oh, okay.
No, it'll float for a good long time. But anyway, there's it floating away, and back to the materials.
It just kind of hangs in there like a merger, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And again, I'm pulling that one out of there. It's a heck of a strike indicator.
So do you use something else sometimes for that post?
Well, thank you. And that is a wonderful lead into tonight's fly. And we've called this one the Darling Starling Para. And let me put the Darling Starling into the vise. And I'm going to put it in the oriented position that it would on the water. Because the wings are starling tips. And the body is a yarn extended body. A yarn, it's not dubbing, but it's could be dubbing. And of course, the hackle is the hackle, and it's a parachute that's not. But we thought that was kind of funny, and we did the Darling Starling wings as a fun gesture to our friend Sherry Steele. Anyway, let's set this aside. And the first thing I want to get out is my needle. This needle does a lot of stuff for me, but tonight it's going to be an extended body tool. And I'm just going to take and tie that on the needle just about right there. All right, now I'm going to slip over to the materials. And we're going to get out some moose fibers. I just need a few for the tail. Get back over here. And I think these are well enough stacked that I don't even need to bother stacking them. So what I'm going to do is slip these in place. And I want you to notice that the length of my tail is going to be from the end of the needle to the end of here. So all this back in here serves another function. So I'm just going to tie that on the needle. And we'll just cut that like that. We can just leave that like that if we want. And back over in the materials area, you don't need to bother going over there, Gretchen. Yeah. And I've just got a piece of Red Heart yarn. I checked on Amazon if somebody wants to know where and how to get Red Heart yarn. Well, it's a yarn that's 4 strands all twisted together. And it wasn't long ago that it used to be 98 cents a skein, but I looked on Amazon just before we signed on tonight, and it was basically, it varied, but it was between $3 and $7 a skein. And there was a whole lot of things based on how much you buy and all that kind of stuff.
Probably better off at Hobby Lobby or Michael's or...
Oh, exactly. Okay, so I'm going to now get my Griffin's Thin. And if you don't have Griffin's Thin, you can get Healthy Hoof off of Amazon. It's a horse product that works really well for fly tying. And so what I'm going to do is use the Griffin's Thin, and I'm going to put a coat of glue on this. On the needle and on the hair. And now I'm just going to start wrapping towards the point of the needle. And I'm not going to worry one bit about whether those hair fibers go up, down, around the hook or whatever. I don't really give a darn because they're not going to be on anything here in a little bit. They are going to be held in place by the glue that I just wrapped down while it's wet. Okay, don't cut this off. You're going to need that here in just a minute. It's a lot longer than I need, so I'll get rid of some of it. But for the biggest part now, I'm going to tie this off. Kind of neat the way that the variegated yarn strand makes that kind of a variegated looking sort of a body, isn't it? All right, now let me pull this off. And we end up with an extended body. Well, this one isn't dry, but I've got one over here that I made earlier, and it's a body that's done, and it's got that waste piece of yarn on it. We need that. So let me just set that aside for a second. get my needle and take it out of the vise, and we'll get another hook. And like Gretchen did, I'm going to deviate from the original poly yarn wing or the Darling Starling wing, and I'm also going to put on a CDC wing. Why? Because it's a lot easier to work with that than a lot of other things while you're on camera. So let me slip over here and get me a bundle of CDC. I've got 3 really lousy feathers, and by the time I put them all together and use only the tips, it'll be just about right. And we'll just tie that in place. All right, we'll cut that off. Now let's get our body. And we'll decide how long we want that body to be. Let's just say I want it to be about right there. That'll be just about right. Now what I'm going to do now is cut this off of here. And I told you not to throw this away, right? Well, that's because we really need that, but we don't need it the way it was tied in there. That's just a way of storing it for use later, because I don't want to take loops of thread like I did with the original one on the poly around as a kind of a tent rope to hold the tent peg in place. I'm going to use this instead, and all you do is you pull this up like this, bring that around, and tie that in place. And I need to tighten it up just a little bit. It slipped on me. There we go. Now what that does is anchors that in place at a 90-degree angle for us. And now I'll just go ahead and trim off the waist here. If I wanted to, I could trim it out there. I mean, just leave it part of the wing. But I don't want to do that. If it was poly, I would. But anyhow, I'm going to reach over here and grab my hackle. And I need to cut off some of that. Kind of messed it up, I did. Okay, and I've got the fibers pulled more off of one side of the feather than the other. It just makes things lay in place a lot better when you wrap. And we'll just take and get this in. I like to get that first turn just tight up against that body. Right back here is where I'm talking about. In case you're wondering, right there. And then I'm going to just wrap forward to the wing. And I'm going to make a couple of wraps around that thread with the material, wrap it on around to anchor it, and tie off the thread right there under the wing and around the head. Couple of half hitches, and then I'll put on a whip. And what we'll do now is I'll just take the edge of my scissors to break away that thread there, and we'll come up here, and same thing, we'll just nick that out of there. And we'll set that aside. And what we have here now is one of the versions of the fly that's more like we fished most of the time we were in Montana, except remember, we were fishing stuff, let's see, that was, I don't know if I got any here right now, or here's one tied on a size 20 with an extra long tail. And set that aside. Okay, here's one that we got fancy and did a curled up body, and the body is made out of not yarn, but it's made out of athletic pre-tape. Makes a kind of a nice looking fly. And when you apply work glue in with that pre-tape stuff, it makes it just as waterproof as can be because it seals it right up with the glue. Anyway,
That's right.
any questions on that?
Let's see. We have, oh, John says he does a similar thing, but uses silicone instead of glue to keep from making the tail too stiff.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I seem to have a really good success rate hooking up on this.
Ah.
But on the other hand, I don't know what it is about fishing a spring creek, but I seem to do better hooking up than I do in faster water. Maybe it's because I see the take coming and I can work into it a lot better than the quick yank that I do when all of a sudden they explode out of the water on top of your fly in faster water. I don't know what it is, but I have a better hookup rate for whatever reason. Now, there's one thing that we haven't talked about, and I'm surprised that someone didn't mention it. But what if we were to combine both these flies? What if we had something wrapped down onto the hook towards the bend, and then you'd had the parachute? Well, you'd have an emerging type of a situation, stuck partway in the shuck, something. Or what if you had a little tuft of antron sticking out there? Just some thoughts of fun things that you could do. Just a thought. And we're not trying to do anything, get you in anything, but we have done it. And to tell you the truth, there are times when it's just absolute killer, and you'd say, "Oh man, we got it figured out." The next 3 or 4 trips out to the Spring Creek, you just take an absolute whipping. So all I can tell you is that when it works really well.
I also like this fly on a high mountain lake. Seems to where it's real clear and
Just
it seems to do a real good job.
cast it out, let it sit and bounce on the surface, and you don't do anything but just every now and then give it a little twitch.
Yeah, it seems to work really good. Really small in a red that might kind of look like an ant is good.
Yep. Anyway, any other questions? No.
I like the fly because it's a good fly.
Oh,
it's a
thank
good
you.
fly. It looks great. I got to tie it and have my husband fish it.
I guarantee it'll fish really fine. If you catch them on an Adams parachute, or you can tie an Adams Para Glen, you'll have the same success rate either way.
I'd like to know how it works on the Metolius.
Yeah.
Oh, you would?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
But I would really like, and I think Jeff is in some of your area, Jeff, you've got some really heavily fished eastern streams where the fish can kind of tell who manufactured the hook that your fly is tied on, because they're so sharp. I hadn't seen so many. And I'm wondering if a different posture of the hook in the water wouldn't make them react differently. I don't know. But you're in an area where you could do some testing for us, Jeff.
I wonder if they kind of ignore that hook hanging down and they're focusing on the fly up above.
Yeah, there's that. And it's in a different position than anything that stung them in the past.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sometimes just something different.
Yeah. Boy, how many times have we said that?
Oh boy.
I can't tell you how many times it's made a difference.
Some of the water we fished in Montana was so heavily fished, and in the park that the key was to do something different.
I took a father and son fishing on Slough Creek one day, and we had to leave early for a meeting with his wife. So we were real close to the time I had to leave. I says, guys, we haven't caught any fish today. Would you like to catch a fish? Yeah, and they had been fishing their size 18s and 20 you-get-ems, whatever they were, all day. And I mean, the fish would come up and look at them, and again, they know who the manufacturer of the hook was. And I said, well, here, guys, and I gave them a number 4 zonker each. And the father made the first swing through the pool and was into a fish immediately. Give them something different. I'm not saying the zonker was the thing. They'd seen every size 18 there was. Went to the other end of the scale with something that wiggled all over the place. So, whatever. Anyway, any other questions before we move on to the next item?
Al, one thing you've done with that pattern is it appears you've made the hook function like a clink hammer hook. And I know you're aware of a pattern, the Brooks sprout,
Okay.
It's tied on a clinkhammer hook. And the difference in comparison would be on the Brooks sprout tied on a clinkhammer. Instead of that CDC wing you had on there, you had a piece of round foam.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that really is a strike indicator, even in fast water riffle type thing. But it's an interesting ability to change a scud hook into a clinkhammer.
Uh, we we thought so as well, and understand you could use any hook you want. I mean, a regular dry fly hook would work and just stick a little further down into the water. But there's one thing I forgot to do, and I may as well do it right now, and that is when we glue this guy, he would have been finished tying it like that. I always put a drop of glue right down there at the junction between the body and the hackle, and all that comes together, and you glue the hackle and the body all at the same time, and you're coming from the reverse direction of what you normally do, so you'll want that glue to run down into that area, and it'll glue most of the hackle and the head in the process. But anyhow, should have done that and I didn't. Anyhow, any other suggestions, questions, comments? We actually have 2 weekly tips tonight. We're going to have a continuation of the Google techniques, and then we're going to get to the main tip tonight, which will be the Dutch tool. But for now, let's go to the Google tips we talked about last week, searching by writing, by voice, and by lens. Well, Adrian Diamond in Australia sent me another one. He says you can also search by image, and you do it this way. Well, and as you can see there, we've got, let me get my pointer out. What we have here is this is a Google search, if you will, and I want you to notice up here, it says images.google.com. And when you do that, it brings up a Google search with the image right there where I've got that top red arrow. And that is telling you that at the bottom arrow is pointing at the camera. And that camera, when you click it, brings up a screen. Let me get this out of here. Brings up a screen that allows you to either cut and paste a picture into it, or take one off of your hard drive, a JPEG, whatever you need to do to get a picture into the menu that shows up coming out of that bottom arrow, and you will get the same thing as you would on the image search that we did before.
So you're not taking a picture, you're doing a cut and paste.
You're doing a cut and paste of an existing picture you already have, or you have somewhere.
Could you do that, a cut and paste out of your if
Your computer can get to it, yes, you can. Anyway, so getting back to the weekly tip, thanks to Adrian in Australia for that tip, and we've added to our bag of tricks. Now we want to talk about the Dutch tool. And well, very honestly, Gretchen, would you reach up over there and get me a size 8 something? Get a 3X long 8. Good, there's a size 8 hook. Let me just put that down over here. All right, let's take this out. In the recent past, Dutch Baughman taught a clinic for us on, I don't know, on a Friday, 3 weeks ago, whatever it was. It was in the very recent past. And one of the things he taught that I thought turned out incredibly well was his way of explaining a standard hook and the X system of hooks based on the hook eye. And what he did that really caught my attention, and I can't tell you how many times I have taught similar classes and never used this technique. I would explain it, draw, all those kinds of things. He explained it using a couple of hooks, and he held the 2 hooks up with his hands, kind of back to back and all that stuff, and it really got the idea apart that it's 2 hooks wide and all of that. Well, trying to hold 2 hooks up, I thought was a bit of a problem. But this is what he was doing. Is there is the length of a shank of a size 8 hook standard length. And you can see those two little arches there, made out of two hooks put together. Well, instead of trying to hold those together, I made the Dutch tool. And it's a size 8. It has only one purpose: to explain hook sizing to a class. So let's just hold this up here. And now I need one for the hook eye. Well, I made one of those too. And I can say, well, there it is there, and this is the 3X long hook, and I'll be darned if it isn't. So that's how you can do it. In Dutch, here's a set of tools coming your way so you don't have to fiddle around picking up hooks and trying to hold them up and explain the stuff. You've got a couple of tools coming your way. Compliments of the Beattys in Boise, Idaho.
Oh, thank you, my friend. That'll be very handy.
Would you put that hook up again? Put that tool up again. I want to take a picture.
Okay, here's the tool and the second tool. Well, let me get them so you can see.
I have a question. How did you get the hooks on the hackle plier? I mean, was that some sort of tubing or?
No, you take two hooks and you cut the eye off of them, put them together and wrap them together with a little bit of thread.
Okay.
And then let me go to here again. And then this is one of the hackle pliers that you can see it really is strong and hard to open and everything, and too bad that it won't hold a feather. But then what you do is you get over it like that. Of course, I've got an eye there, and I got to get rid of that eye.
Yeah.
And once you've done that, then you can put two of them together, and that'll make this one, and one with just the eye together for the X-long demonstration.
Okay, got it.
Then you wrap it with thread.
Yeah, wrap the hooks with thread. You just
And did you put
Super glue or something on it?
super glue?
yeah, I did UV because it's fast. And okay, well, sharing tonight is the next thing to come up, and sharing on BTs is a program that we do where we ask the audience to share with us. Of course, we share with them. And tonight I am going to start by sharing the one fly. I've already talked to Sherry about that, but the Darling Starling. We want to talk about the Darling Starling as a series of flies. And Sherry Steele is kind of the driving force behind that. And she made some wet flies tied out of starling feathers. And we had this wild idea that we would do the fly we showed you tonight, the Para Glen / Darling Starling Glen with starling body feathers. Makes a cute looking thing. Well, there's other things that you can do. And the reason I'm talking about starling is because Sherry did a program on her channel on starling. And she called it Darling Starling, and I just fell in love with the idea. And I had a skin, and it had been sitting here for Jesus forever. And so anyway, this is the fly that I tied all the starling. The only thing that's not starling is the body floss. Let me zoom in here. And I've mangled it pretty bad getting it out of here. But anyway, the wing is made out of starling primaries. The body is a starling feather. The beard is a starling feather, and there you've got a size 20.
You mean the tail is a starling feather?
Yeah, it's all starling except for the rib and the body itself, and that's a regular floss, and then we use starling quill tips out of the wings for the wing slips. Goodness gracious, there we go. And now it's all of your turn to share with us. So let's get Jim. There you go. You're on the spotlight.
Okay, this was a fly I kind of designed for Steve Morton, who was going to go up to the Kispioks and go up into British Columbia. And he wanted something different than what everybody else, his buddies, were taking up there. And he wanted it dark. So what this has is a tail underneath here, very much like the Undertaker. And then the body dubbing is Arizona dubbing, and it's the Canadian black, which has some hints of flash in it that are a dark red, as well as some blue and I think even green. And then what I up front here, like the fuchsia and the blue, and there's multi-colors in there. That is ostrich. And then I've got some on top, just some crystal flash, and then the hackle around the front is actually comes from blue-eared pheasant that's been dyed black, but it's the marabou from the from the blue-eared pheasant.
Oh, that's a beautiful fly, Jim.
And the thing is that with this particular one, if you put a blue light on it, it doesn't really show up so much. Let me see if I can change this a little bit.
Oh, there you go.
It's got the UV on it, and boy,
Sure enough, yeah.
it really, and supposedly when you read that book, What the Fish Sees, yellow and chartreuse green are two of the colors that are seen better underwater in murky water. Anyway,
when is he going to be fishing this fly?
well, he fished it, and they none of the crew did very well. But what they did is he gave this fly to the guide to take home and use it, which the guy did. And a couple days later, called him up. He says, for a steelhead fly, that doesn't work worth a damn. But he caught 5 different species. He caught a Chinook, he caught a sea-ring cut, and he caught a brown trout and a rainbow trout and something else.
Oh, wow.
On it.
Well, that's a wild story.
Interesting. Jim, thank you so much. Anybody else have something that they want to share?
Yeah, here's a brook sprout. This is very small, and it's not the ones I fish in Montana. I don't know about Dutch, but are not tied on clink hammer hooks precisely. They're tied on those TMC 2487s, 2488s, those very tiny scud hooks. And this is a Beattys version, and it's probably I'm guessing it's tied on a 20 hook. So that's a brook sprout, and there's a PMD version I fish all the time too.
Well, it's a pattern that looks really buggy to me.
It's great, and it's that little dot of foam on there. You can see it a mile away if you're fishing calmer water, obviously.
It came to mind because of the description of on Google, when you can put an image on Google and search that way. And now I'm somewhere I don't want to be on Zoom, and I can't figure out how to get out of here. Well, maybe I'll just describe to you. Sorry, because now I can't even see me because I'm on my phone, and it's more difficult to do this. But what I discovered is I've taken photos on my phone of flies that I've sent pictures to people or in our newsletter or whatever. And when you use an iPhone and you take a picture, it gives you at the bottom, sometimes it says look up bug. So if you touch look up bug, it will tell you what your fly is. So
Ah,
when you tie a mayfly and it says Hexagenia limbata, you know you scored, right? So now let me
Right.
and I had taken a photo. Maybe now I can get it to go. Only the host can share at this meeting. Okay, I can't figure out how to share a photo of that happening on my phone. I was going to try to do that, but anyway, it's pretty funny. So next time you take a picture of a fly on an iPhone, I don't know if Androids do it, and you see a little look up, and it shows a little emblem of a bug. Touch the button and see what comes up. It's entertaining.
thank you, Susan. Anybody
Yeah.
else have something they want to share?
Let me pick up on part of the presentation a little bit ago. The gentleman that was explaining the Google search alternatives. And this is almost a little spooky because it was within the last week that I learned it myself. You know, you've got the search bar when you open Google, where you can type in a name. You've got the little microphone where you can talk to the phone and it talks back to you. But the other one, the last one that you featured, when you open that one, if you have an app on your iPhone called Google Lens, it'll basically open your camera and you can take a picture of an object. And to my absolute amazement, it will take you to exactly what it is, where you can buy it. I have yet to find something that it doesn't work on. I've used it to basically take a picture of objects around the house. I took a picture of my watch. My son-in-law had a malfunctioning part on his trailer. It had no identification on it, no manufacturer's name, model number, anything. He took a picture of it. It gave him immediately a description of an identification of what it was, where he could buy it. And 2 days later, it was, he bought it on Amazon.
Isn't that absolutely amazing? Yes, there it is, looking good.
And then because you tied yours in well, I want to say the wrong position. There it is. So I'm going to have to do
That's
that one again.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
You know what that is? That is a renegade with a poly tail. I wonder,
Okay.
you may have come up with a whole new pattern. We have to give that a try. Hey, that's it for now, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. It's a wrap until next week. We'll see you then. Take care.